Well, good morning. I am David Rutledge, president of the Polanyi Society, and I want to open this conference by bringing greetings from the Polanyi Society. It's the official sponsor of our gathering. The Society actually began in 1972 as a result of a Polanyi conference at which a number of the people here were present. It has a regular membership of about 150 scholars from around the world who are interested in the work of Michael Polanyi and in the broader issues that he dealt with. We hold an annual meeting every year at the same time as the American Academy of Religion. This coming November in San Diego, our next meeting will have Charles Taylor presenting at 2 sessions on the relation of his work to Michael Polanyi. We also publish Tradition and Discovery 3 times a year, and this has been a major venue for work about Bill Poteat. There have been 3 issues devoted primarily to Bill's work over the past 20 years, in addition to other occasional articles. The Society has also sponsored summer conferences every 5 years or so. The last was in Chicago 2 years ago, and it included a panel on Bill Poteat, and that's when the planning for this conference began. The Society also maintains contact with Polanyian groups in England and in Hungary. Several former students of Poteat have been active in the Society in recent years, so our sponsorship of this conference was natural, and I want to thank Dale Cannon, Wally Mead, and James Van Pelt, particularly for their work in making this meeting a reality. All of them are former students or friends of Bill, and it was wonderful to see the kind of spontaneous interest in having such a meeting that appeared. One last note. Richard Gelwick, a founder of the Society and former editor of Tradition and Discovery, is currently in the last stages of a battle with cancer, and he was unable to be here. He also is a Yale graduate and was close to Bill at certain stages. You might remember Bill invited Richard to contribute his bibliography to Intellect and Hope, and he praised Richard's introduction to Polanyi, The Way of Discovery, as, quote, unlikely to be surpassed, unquote. I will be seeing Richard next week, and if anyone would like to send a word of greeting to him, those of you who knew Richard, I have some small cards that you can use for that purpose. One other thing that I would like to mention while I'm up here is the relationship of the Poteat family to Yale. I guess I have a special interest in this because the Poteat family also had a special interest in Furman, where I taught for 34 years. Bill's father, Edwin McNeill Poteat, to whom Bill dedicated a philosophical daybook, was born here in New Haven because his father, Bill's grandfather, was pastor of Calvary Baptist Church. The church is still here, and it has a largely Chinese, or at least Asian, Baptist congregation. And that reminds us that both Bill's father and his grandfather were missionaries to China, and of course that's where he was born. Bill's father, McNeill, also gave one of the Beecher lectures in preaching here at Yale in 1939-40. In beginning his lecture, McNeill reported that his mother, having encountered drunken Yale students following a football game, declared, "I'd rather send my son to hell than to Yale." So perhaps this is why Bill went to Oberlin instead of Yale. Indirectly relevant to Bill's thought is the fact that both his father and his uncle, Hubert Poteat, were accomplished musicians and composed a number of hymns for the church. So Bill's use of music as a major metaphor for the temporal quality of knowing has a history. Finally, in one of his many books, his father McNeill explained why Baptists, at least liberal Baptists, criticized formalism in worship, particularly creeds, formal liturgy, and sacrament. He concluded, quote, "Baptists have certainly never lived by the drone of liturgy, however majestic and elevated, but rather by the voice of prophecy, sometimes mad, often confused, but always passionate," unquote. It seems to me he could have been speaking of his son Bill, who was certainly a passionate prophet. Polanyi Society is glad to be involved in this conference.
Thank you, David. On behalf of the Planning Committee, which includes Walter Mead, James Clement Van Pelt, and myself, I welcome you to this opening of the Primacy of Persons, the Legacy of William H. Poteat Conference. I also want to extend thanks to not only my two colleagues on the committee, but to a number of other folks. I particularly want to thank 20 generous donors who contributed collectively $1,650 to the initial down payment with Yale Conference Services that made this possible in the first place. It wouldn't, that was a test case. If we weren't able to do that, then we might not have been able to have this conference. He received his BD, the equivalent of today's MDiv, in 1944. In 51, he received his PhD at Duke University, where he taught philosophy and religion for most of his career, the years 1960 to 1987. But between 1947 and 1958, a lot of people who associate Bill with Duke may not have known, unless they had an opportunity to, let's say, read the article we now have on Wikipedia, that he taught philosophy at UNC Chapel Hill. And it's interesting how he started out basically as director of the YMCA in Chapel Hill and got to teaching informally some courses there, and they got the attention of the philosophy department. The philosophy department soon hired him to teach part-time, which moved into a lectureship, and eventually he was hired a tenure-track position. And when he left UNC Chapel Hill, he had the position of associate professor. So he distinguished himself in his teaching, in that sense, primarily then in philosophy, and from a legitimate, regular philosophy department. There's a bit of a controversy there. I know that controversy myself, having spent most of my career not only teaching philosophy, but having gotten my PhD under Bill at Duke in religion. There's a bit of a problem in finding a place, opening people's minds to the possibility that somebody who got it without earning one's spurs in the usual way, that they could handle philosophy in a way that would be respected and respectable among the broader philosophy community. But Bill did that, and he could do it just in many respects under the force of his own personality and ability to articulate things so well. At Duke, Bill became a leading early exponent of the thought of Michael Polanyi, who delivered Yale's Terry Lectures in 1962. And we're hoping and expecting that this conference will be of special value to anyone interested in Polanyi, anyone interested in the nature of personhood. And that's prominently identified in the title, The Primacy of Persons, which is also the title, first part of the title of the collection of his essays that Jim Steins and Jim Nickel, excuse me, the name slipped my mind for a moment, who is no longer with us, but at some point in the conference we're going to spent a little time remembering some of Bill's students who are no longer with us. And there's, at the aging of the rest of us, we're getting to a place where there won't be too many years when we couldn't have this conference in the way we are having it now. Yeah. Oh, damn. Oh, that's what you said. I thought you said Dale for a moment. The two go so closely together in your vocabulary. How is this conference going to be different? Because I think it will be, not just because it's about Bill Poteat and the ideas with which he is concerned and which he spent so much effort and time in working with in our own presence. I want to say that I'd like for this, and I'm expecting, and I've to all of you who are directly participating by way of making a presentation, I've specifically asked that we'll do our best and work together to do our best to have this be a post-critical intellectual colloquy. In that sense, the typical critical intellectual colloquy for now several generations from the early part of the 20th century, particularly with the professionalization of philosophy and related disciplines, it has become a kind of hardball competitive effort to sort of argue on behalf of certain theses and do one's darndest to shoot the other person down. Bill taught us, so did Polanyi teach us, to approach these sorts of things and these kinds of conversations and discussions in a different way and with a different spirit. Our focus will not be on the presentation of theses, though some will certainly be presented, or the presentation of those theses for the usual sort of critical challenge and debate, but our focus will be on initiating paths of open-ended convivial inquiry, akin to the kind of seminar discussions that most of us enjoyed in Poteat's own classes. Our hope is that the conference will embody, in that sense, a genuine post-critical intellectual colloquy and set a precedent. One of the things that we are trying to do, those of us on the planning committee are trying to do, is to explore the possibility maybe this would not be the unique and only conference of its kind, but there might be something that could be followed up. But the possibilities, a different way of doing that by other conferences or seminars or whatever, well, some of that will be explored in the discussions we'll be having here. So where do we go from here? That's our theme for the last session on Sunday morning, or Sunday noon, basically. In that regard, the conference is this kind of tipping point for maybe something else will go from here. And I hope it will. And it's good to see that among those present, some younger persons, and not just those of us who are not only old and gray and becoming a little less able to get around than we used to, maybe something will come of that. Today, for the main conference, I just want to give you a little idea without going into detail. The first part of the day will begin with a talk in a few moments by one of the few active colleagues that Bill had in his last years at Duke, Bruce Lawrence, who will address the topic, who was Bill Poteat and what was he about? Our first session this afternoon was, what was Poteat's major preoccupation that occupied him for his entire career? Is there a kind of continuity? And you'll find that loud and clear that there was a major focus that carried him through his entire career, that all of us in some ways have gotten to know and indeed been part of the very trajectory of that focus. Following that, we're having a special session, particularly connected to the sponsorship of the conference by the Polanyi Society, a special session on the connection between Poteat and Polanyi. There's been raised in a number of contexts, especially in the Polanyi Society, was Poteat a Polanyian, a sort of a disciple of Polanyi, and a lot of us are very uncomfortable with that idea, but nevertheless, Bill Poteat was a major advocate of getting to know Polanyi, presenting Polanyi's ideas, both orally in a variety of contexts and in his own publications and so forth, and the informal connections that he made to get people interested. And, for example, in putting together the great anthology Intellect and Hope, which brought together 15 major scholars from, humanistic scholars from, including humanist scientists from all over the globe to address what was Polanyi's thought all about, not just his great work in science, and specifically in physical chemistry, but in philosophy of science and philosophy generally. Poteat was important in that regard, important in arranging for the Duke lectures and a variety of other speaking engagements that Polanyi had in his latter years. So we're going to be exploring that in the latter part of this afternoon, and in this evening, and I'd like you to begin to think about it, you probably already are, it's going to be very informal, though we're going to start off with a somewhat informal presentation by Sam Mann on remembering, taking a look at the influence of Bill Poteat on his life and on the civil rights movement that Sam was very much a part of and still is. But it's going to open up into a time where we can share, as long as we are ready to stay around and share and stay awake, I suppose, memories, anecdotes, even if it's just a fragment of something that doesn't develop into a full-blown story, we want to do that remembering. And remembering some of the jokes perhaps that Bill told, or jokes about Bill, or jokes that were told in Bill's classes. I hope we'll really feel well prepared for that, because I look forward to it very much. Tomorrow we're going to be focusing, to begin with Poteat's connection to and what he did with, how he read, how he interpreted various other critics of modernity. And that will be followed up by a focus on the question, okay, what is it to be post-critical? And then in the afternoon, what are some of the implications in different areas of thought and practice of post-critical thinking of the sort that Bill Poteat was a major part of, and some of the things that he directly had to say. And then on Sunday morning, our first major focus for the morning is on looking in a kind of retrospect over his entire career and in relationship to this conference as well. What was Poteat's place within the discipline of philosophy, in the discipline of theology, and in the academy generally? And there's a lot of questions that many of us have wrestled with about those very questions, and we're going to have two very good papers directly addressing that. And then at the very end, over lunch, and I hope as many of you as can stay, I know many of you have to move on for a variety of purposes and won't be able to be present, but we're going to have a time for, in light of, in terms of what we've experienced over this conference, what have we learned? Where do we go from here? Is there something that we should really look into as to what either we can do to carry forward the vision that has been re-articulated during this time, and maybe there's some concrete things that can be considered, proposed, and discussed. So that's what we're in for. Right now, before we have our initial speaker this morning, we're going to do two important things. I want to introduce first Wally Mead, who will talk about the Poteat Archive and introduce the Special Librarians Collection.
Dale, there are some people standing, and there are some seats. There's a couple of them back here and one right over here.
Interesting history to bringing this all together in terms of the archive, and I hope those of you who were unable to get here early enough yesterday to take a look at the archive that has been so skillfully put together that you'll find some time before you leave at the end of the conference. It will be open throughout the day today and Saturday. Okay, but hope you can make it today. Anyone looking in the door at this small group would not realize that we have the beginning here of an international conference. We have people here from the Netherlands, from Ireland, from Canada, any other countries that I've missed here that are being represented here. We're a small group. The Polanyi Society itself over the years has been fairly small, but we feel that we have among the people who are able to come together at our annual meetings and at our special meetings such as this one, they are the special people that are well informed, are asking the right questions, are challenging some of the shibboleths that we've all grown up among in our culture and in our academic careers. I came to Duke to begin my graduate studies in political science the same year, 1960, when Bill Poteat came to teach. And during that year, I kept hearing from the graduate students in religion, this is an extraordinary person. You ought to take one of his seminars. Well, what I was slated to take did not really allow that, but one day I did sneak in to sit in the corner of one of his seminars. It was about midway through the semester, unfortunately, and Bill was talking about the phenomenology, an aspect of philosophy that I had not at that point gotten into, and everything was right over my head. That was the only direct contact that I had with Bill during those 3 years. And it was several years later when he began publishing his works, and I began writing to him in reaction to them, very favorable reaction, that I really got to know him, and there's quite a chunk of correspondence in the collection between Bill and me, and it was one of the really valuable experiences in my life, and I also did get together with him from time to time, even as late as 1995 in Athens. And one memorable experience I want to report, I think most of you know that that W.H. Auden was one of his favorite writers and poets, and one morning during my stay at their residence in Athens, I was awakened by him coming in, reading a section from Auden, and as soon as I got my eyes open and realized what was going on, he said, "We must go down to the Piraeus today," which is kind of paraphrasing the first sentence or two in Plato's Republic. And we indeed did spend half the day in the Piraeus, the port city of Athens, chomping on calamari and talking about philosophy generally. It was just a terribly moving experience, and I kept having these deja vu flashbacks to the classical period. I wasn't alive then, but I focused on that. That had been my primary focus in the teaching of philosophy and in political philosophy. Well, it would seem natural then that the archive would end up at Duke. And that's where we first made the approach to the librarian there. And it was over a period of 2 years that I kept asking, well, you know, we're making this offer, are you interested? And finally, after at least 2 years, I got the response that we're not interested in this area. We're focusing our special collections more on business education. And I realized that immediately disqualified us. And it's turned out to the better. I'd always kind of hoped that it could end up here at Yale because both Bill and I at different times attended and graduated from Yale Divinity School. And so 4 years ago in the summer, I was taking one of the special summer seminars offered to alumni here on the campus. And I got to know James Clement Van Pelt. And where did he go? Oh, okay, James. And he introduced me to Paul Strulenberg, the head librarian, and we talked about the possibility of setting up an archive. He was interested. And at that time, I was introduced to Martha Smalley, who is the Special Collections librarian here at Yale Divinity School. And she was very agreeable to it, but it took a while to actually define the nature and the scope of our project. And finally, when we got going, probably about 3 years ago, I had been making appeals to membership of the Polanyi Society. Any of you who have either been a student of Bill's or otherwise have known him and have some papers, whether it be syllabi from the course or seminars you've had from him, notes you've taken from your classes, early distributions of and versions of manuscripts that later turned into articles or books, correspondence, and he carried on a fantastic correspondence. How he got anything else done, I have no idea. And so much of it was in longhand writing on a legal pad. But it's among the papers most valued in this collection. You can see some samples here in the case, in these cases. And it's a rich collection. It's not a large collection as some collections go. Some of you are well acquainted with the Polanyi collection at the University of Chicago, and I don't know how that would be measured in lineal feet, but it's a very large collection. This, I'm guessing, might be 2+ lineal feet, but very well organized in terms of boxes and folders, very accessible in terms of reading and research. And I thought early on that something like this had to be established. In a way, Bill Poteat's ideas are difficult to communicate unless you've sat in his classroom. And I didn't. Most of you who've had contact with him and are here did. And I always value what you have to add to my impressions from having read quite thoroughly his books and his articles. Because so much, and you know this from the nature of his philosophical thinking, had to be communicated orally and heard orally. It's one of those two words that sound the same. To get the full inflections and emphases and so on that provided a very important context to what he was saying. And a part of our collection consists of recordings, most of them originally made on tape, but we've digitalized them and they're on CDs. And so you can hear him in an interview that James made, I think for a radio station, wasn't it, James? And in some of his talks, some of his lectures. It's a very valuable collection from some of his classroom presentations. And I urge you to make use of this collection. I want to acknowledge at this point and introduce Martha Smalley, the Special Collections librarian who has been invaluable. As you have sent to me papers that you've had, I've read them all and I have copied them all on my copy machine, because whatever you may insure a package for, you don't, if you lose it, you've lost it. So I've got that backup in terms of everything having been copied, even the CDs, and the CDs have been put on line and are available through the William Poteat website, just recently set up. Thanks
At least at this point, a selection.
to Kiran Kushel, and it's readily available whenever you want to plug into that. And also through the Pawnee Society, you can plug into the Poteat